Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session on water secure cities and what we need to do in terms of utilities to make services more climate resilient. I'm Juliette Willits. I'm from the University of Technology in Sydney. I'm very happy to moderate this session this afternoon. We were just starting a little bit late. I'm sorry, because keynote speaker is still on her way here. But if it's okay, we're going to get started and move things in a slightly different order. So as we know, cities are highly impacted by climate change. We're struggling with water resources in many, many cities. And the idea of having secure water resources and water security for cities is becoming more and more important. So we've heard about it at the UN 2023 conference earlier this year, at the high-level political forum, and more, we're going to need to see action from the utilities side. There are more and more demands coming to them. And as we know, the actions won't just be on their behalf. It will be also from policymakers, also from the international finance institutions. And we're going to need action on governance. We're going to need action around financing. We're going to need cross-sectoral action because, as we know, the water sector is interlinked with all the other urban development sectors. So to begin with, we're going to start with the second keynote, which is a short video. And so if we could start that. And this video is from Isabelle Camille, who is from the French side, so from the Water Protection and Management, Mineral Resources and Aquatic Ecosystems. And she is Deputy Director and will deliver the keynote online.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, nous ne pouvons malheureusement être parmi vous aujourd'hui à l'occasion de cette COP28, mais j'ai le plaisir et l'honneur de vous adresser ce court message dans le cadre de vos travaux relatifs à la sécurisation de l'accès à la ressource en eau. Comme vous le savez, l'eau est une ressource indispensable pour l'ensemble de nos usages, pour notre santé, nos écosystèmes et l'ensemble de notre économie. Elle est essentielle pour de nombreux usages, les usages destinés à l'eau potable, nos usages industriels, les usages agricoles, ou encore pour produire de l'énergie. Toutefois, cette ressource est en tension de façon de plus en plus fréquente en France comme dans d'autres pays à travers le monde. Et c'est pourquoi il est essentiel d'agir pour mieux protéger notre ressource. Dans le cadre de l'exercice de planification écologique lancé par la France à l'été 2022, à l'issue d'un épisode conséquent de sécheresse, le président de la République a annoncé le 30 mars dernier le volet eau de cette planification écologique, à savoir le plan eau, qui est un plan qui vise une gestion sobre et résiliente de notre ressource en eau. Ce plan eau, qui comprend 53 mesures, vise notamment à la sobriété hydrique de l'ensemble des usages et de l'ensemble des usagers. Cette sobriété hydrique, qui doit se décliner ensuite bassin versant par bassin versant, territoire par territoire, vise une baisse des prélèvements de moins 10% à horizon 2030. Aujourd'hui, ce travail est engagé dans l'ensemble des bassins versants par nos instances de bassin. S'il est indispensable de réduire nos prélèvements en eau, avec du coup cette ambition forte de baisse des prélèvements de moins 10%, il est également important de penser à utiliser des ressources jusqu'ici trop peu exploitées. C'est dans ce cadre qu'un chantier important a été engagé en France en faveur de la réutilisation des eaux non conventionnelles, que ce soit des eaux usées traitées, les eaux de pluie ou bien encore les eaux grises à l'intérieur du bâtiment. Le président de la République a ainsi annoncé sa volonté d'avoir 10% d'eau usée traitée et d'eau non conventionnelle d'ici 2027, alors qu'aujourd'hui la France est à 1% seulement. L'objectif est de développer pour cela 1000 projets de réutilisation des eaux usées traitées d'ici 2027. L'intention de la France de réutiliser davantage les eaux non conventionnelles découle également de la nécessité de s'adapter au changement climatique. En effet, ce changement climatique accroît la demande hydrique et les besoins en eau, notamment pour le secteur agricole. Comme il ne s'agit pas seulement d'avoir de l'eau en quantité suffisante, mais qu'il faut également avoir une eau de bonne qualité pour l'ensemble de nos usages, la France participe activement à certains travaux européens visant notamment à améliorer cette qualité et cette ressource en eau. Les travaux relatifs à la directive aux résiduaires urbaines, notamment qui sont en cours, vont contribuer à l'amélioration des rejets à l'aval de nos systèmes d'assainissement collectif. Plus largement, le plan eau vise la préservation de nos milieux aquatiques et la prévention des pollutions qui y parviennent. Il s'agit notamment de renforcer la protection de nos aires d'alimentation de captage. un certain nombre de mesures du plan eau concourent à cet objectif. Vous l'aurez compris, notre feuille de route France est vaste et importante, très dense. Elle nécessite une mobilisation non seulement de l'État français, mais également de l'ensemble des collectivités locales, des usagers économiques, des citoyens et de l'ensemble des associations. Il ne me reste plus qu'à vous souhaiter une bonne conférence et de fructueux échanges.
Great. So I hope we're inspired by that idea of reducing extraction by at least 10% and reusing in many other different ways. So I'd like to move to our keynote speaker who's now here. So Ms. Ingrid Gabriella Hoven is Managing Director at GIZ, and she'll be sharing a keynote speech which is on that we're halfway to 2030. So setting the scene for a just transition towards water and climate resilient cities. So if I could invite you to come forward.
Good afternoon. So my apologies. We are now in the typical COP mode where actually sessions are delayed. People are arriving late and the audience has to have a lot of patience. So many, many thanks to all of you. And I'm not quite sure because I assume that this is a really highly informed and passionate audience about water and cities and resilience. This is my guess. And I know that you already had one panel. So I was asking myself, walking across most of the campus, what should I actually share with you, which would actually attract your attention? And I hope that I somehow bridge a bit the time to the next panel. My first sentence really says that actually that water security, regardless whether you deal with them in the rural areas, in the urban areas, is absolutely key for livelihoods and security. And actually, when you look into what the adaptation agenda tells us, I think we all are aware of the fact that the water issue is so core and center for all adaptation measures, either when you consider floods or extreme weather events, or whether it's about droughts and water provision. And actually yesterday, I was with a group of friends of mine with whom we have been discussing the urban and the water issues for a decade now, more or less, a little bit struggling how we could actually deal with the subject in a more prominent way, to give it more attention, to give it more finance, to give it more actually political momentum that is really needed to make a difference on the ground. For us at GIZ, in the German Development Cooperation System, I think we have recognized, because we are so much grounded in what we are doing in our partner countries, in local communities, that we have actually recognized this for a long, long time. And we have started to develop tools and partnerships in different ways. But still, we hope that this whole subject can get more political attention. And as far as I read the preliminary results of this COP, and especially when you look into the action agenda and new partnerships, I think we have the international community has agreed upon a couple of very good new coalitions, initiatives that when we take them seriously, I think really we can make a difference in the future. What is still very important, and this is an agenda that is not new to you as expert in this arena, is of course when we look into what is needed in order to change behavior on the ground. Of course, still when we look into water and urban and resilience issues, still cross-sectoral planning and management concepts is still very important. It's not a new message. We have been discussing this already for decades, I would say. But I think as we now observe within urban areas, how difficult it is, especially when you have more extreme weather events, that we really have to bring together the different communities and figure out what are the best solutions to deal with urban planning, but also in a water-sensitive way. And already a lot of pilots have been established where you use water nature-based solutions that not only serve the city and make it more resilient, but also people. Participatory planning approaches are still needed. So this is and sometimes still an uphill battle. We have sufficient evidence at hand that prove that when you have a broader buy-in by local communities, cities, some quarters, normally the type of solution that they find are much more focused on the real people's need. So top-down in many places hasn't worked properly. But still a way to go to really make this a mainstream feature. In the water sector, well-functioning utilities still play a vital role for sure. I think that the question is, what is really missing? Why do we still lack capacities? Why do we still lack financial sustainability in those areas? And therefore, I think this remains on the agenda. And especially what may actually change in the future. And we GIZ co-organized an event this morning about the issues of capacity building and skills development for the new transformation agenda. And I also would like to say that in this arena, possibly the type of water knowledge that is at hand for many institutions, partner governments, lacks the new features. It's not only about water planning in a traditional way, pipes, target groups, etc., but it's really a much more forecast analysis is needed to see, what kind of water availability you can expect considering droughts and perhaps competing demands, agriculture, industry, consumption by urban areas and rural areas. And additionally, bring in the new factors that are climate induced and make sure that you have people at hand at the planning stage in the utilities that can actually maneuver with these new features. And there is a skills gap that has been underlined this morning as well from other international institutions. The funding gap is still huge. And we all know, finally, we have to bring in much more forcefully the private sector. And of course, this has been in our doing partially and on our lips in any case to create public-private partnerships, but possibly we need more of this kind and also more instruments that would actually deal with the risk that's still perceived in the private sector to provide more services, but also perhaps innovative approaches when it comes about issues combining water and adaptation questions. So I would perhaps like to end with two remarks. The water agenda combined with the urban agenda is going to remain a top priority of German development cooperation as for GIZ as an international agency operating on behalf of the German government, but also of the European Union. And we consider this as actually an agenda of the future, an agenda where we have not only deal with risk mitigation issues, but we should also see the opportunities by dealing with both issues to make actually cities more resilient, but also more people-centered in their planning and service delivery processes. I would like to underline closing a wonderful initiative that it's going to be launched tomorrow at the President's Roundtable. And it's something that Germany, the Netherlands, and the European Union are financing together. And it's a pretty transformative approach. It's called the Urban Water Catalyst Initiative. And by some that have already got to know this approach, this initiative is being considered a game changer. in the global financing of the urban water sector by actually firstly strengthening ultimately the transformation of urban water utilities in a more systematic and integrated way. Because what is being done by this Catalyst initiative is actually there are two instruments, technical cooperation and financial assistance, that they really work together for reform-minded urban utilities. And the key objective of this initiative is really to accelerate the urban water utility turnarounds so that you can really measure performance improvements and really make sure that we yield better results when it comes to access to safe water and sanitation services in cities. It deals with the creditworthiness of those utilities by actually bringing in technical expertise, but also risk reduction instruments from the financial assistance instruments. And tomorrow we are going to announce the launch and the implementation in 20 pre-selected utilities. So please, if your schedule is not so packed with as mine, I warmly recommend to be at 11:30 in the Presidency's roundtable. Thank you for attention. Thank you for being with us here today. I know there's a lot going on outside also. Now the negotiations are approaching the last meters to get the text cleared. There's still many brackets and alternatives, and so many friends and colleagues also are within the negotiations and can't join us today. But I'm happy that I could address you today. Thank you. Much appreciated.
So thank you so much. We took in your messages on political will, on participatory planning, on the need for new capacities that are about forecasting and understanding the future, not just what's gone before. And it's great to hear of the new Catalyst initiative. So I just want to check, are you going to be able to stay with us? Because are you going to be able to stay with us through the panel presentations? Because otherwise there's a call for a photo with you before you leave. Check this. Take a photo. Okay, so we'll just pause. So what I might do is invite up our panel members, and then we'll take a photo, and then we'll move into the panel discussion. So our panel today includes firstly Dr. Sean Phillips, who is a Director General in the Water and Sanitation Unit of the Government of South Africa. So if you could please come forward. We also have Marie-Laure Vercombre, who is from the French Water Partnership. We also have the dieter. No, sorry, I couldn't resist. Dieter Rothenberger, who is the Cluster Coordinator of Water Programs at GIZ. There is an online panel member who I'm not sure if they're there right this second, but we'll bring them in later. And there is also Andre Zikas, who is Chief of Urban Services at GIZ. UN Habitat. Okay. Do you want to come forward and we'll take a photo of you with the panel?
Hello. Hello.
Okay. And if it's okay, if I want to. Okay, so my first, is that on?
Does it work?
Is it on? It's on? Okay, sorry. Okay, so my first question is to Dr. Sean Phillips from the Government of South Africa. And what I'd like to hear from you is to tell us a bit about the biggest challenges that you faced in South Africa in delivering climate resilient water and sanitation services, and to tell us that both from an infrastructure perspective, a governance perspective, and one of the hardest things that we know is to reach low-income communities who are the most at risk. So over to you.
Thank you very much. The video by Isabel was very good. I agree with all the technical solutions that she talked about. For example, increasing water reuse, making sure that new infrastructure is designed to be more resilient, for example, resilient to floods, diversifying the water mix, having much better water conservation and demand management, better use of grey water. As a water scarce country, we would be doing all of those things anyway, whether or not there was climate change. But climate change increases the urgency of doing those things. But while I agree with all of those, technical solutions that Isabel talked about, we have a more fundamental underlying problem, and that's an institutional problem, not a technical problem. So if you're going to do those technical solutions and make them work, you have to have well-functioning institutions at the city level delivering water services. If you don't, it's not going to happen sustainably. And our main challenge that we're grappling with is getting the right kind of institutions in place, which we don't have. We still have the old model of water services being run directly by municipalities with internal municipal departments. And we need to move to a situation where we have well-governed, professionally managed institutions with the right staff, with the right qualifications, effective billing and revenue collection, financially sustainable institutions. If we can get that in place, then all the rest will follow. But if we don't get that in place, none of these technical solutions will happen in a sustainable way. So the main point I'm making is getting the institutions right comes first, and the rest follows. And if you can't really hope to be successful with the rest if you don't get the institutions right. We currently have a problem of declining water services in terms of the quality and the reliability of the service, and that affects the poor most. And that's likely to increase with climate change because, for example, in Johannesburg, we have increasing disruptions to water services because there's increasing heat waves, and the heat waves result in an increase in demand, which results in disruptions in service delivery. And that affects the poor the most when that happens. Unless we get the institutions right, that's going to continue. So even in getting the institutions right is also very important for improving delivery of services to the poor. And we are embarking now on a reform process. We're learning from other African countries like Uganda and Kenya, and Zambia in particular, who've moved towards more of a professional utility model.
Great, thank you. So very important message about the institutions, that it's all very well to have the climate resilient infrastructure and ideas, but if we don't have a mechanism to operationalize them, we're not going anywhere fast. So thank you. So I'm going to hand to Marie-Laure to give a brief introduction to a video that we're about to hear.
It works, yes. Just to say that the video you're going to see is a video of the Greater Paris Sanitation Agency, which treats 3 million cubic meters every day for 9 million people. And they're just sharing with us a few examples of what they're trying to do as best as they can. But it comes as examples of what sanitation utilities can do. Thank you.
Enfin, puisqu'on parle beaucoup de déchets dans le cadre de cette session, la question de la récupération et de la valorisation des ressources est un axe de travail très important pour nous. Quelques chiffres. Donc, ce sont environ 150 000 tonnes de matières sèches qui sont produites chaque année du fait de notre activité de traitement. Donc aujourd'hui, nous avons deux axes de valorisation. D'abord, la valorisation énergétique, puisque cette matière sèche, cette matière organique est valorisée en biogaz. Donc c'est-à-dire qu'on méthanise, on digère nos boues pour produire du biogaz, environ 80 millions de normomètres cubes de biogaz. Ce biogaz nous permet de couvrir en grande partie nos besoins énergétiques, puisque ça, environ la moitié de nos besoins en énergie est couvert par l'énergie produite à partir de ce biogaz. Et aujourd'hui, depuis maintenant quelques années, on travaille à la valorisation du biogaz excédentaire, c'est-à-dire le biogaz qu'on n'est pas capable de réutiliser pour nos besoins, donc se mettre en capacité de le réinjecter dans les réseaux pour le mettre à disposition du territoire et ainsi, d'une certaine manière, contribuer à la décarbonation du territoire. Valorisation énergétique, valorisation aussi agronomique. Une grande partie de ces boues digérées sont valorisées en agriculture, permettant ainsi de ne pas avoir recours ou moins avoir recours aux amendements synthétiques. Voilà, donc c'est une voie de valorisation qui est importante et qui nous convient de maintenir dans le temps. Voilà. Enfin, pour finir, deux enjeux qui me semblent également importants. L'enjeu de l'adaptation aussi au changement climatique, puisqu'on a parlé de l'atténuation ou de la contribution à l'atténuation, il faut aussi s'y adapter. Je vous ai dit, on a un contexte tout à fait particulier avec un étiage sévère qui rend la Seine sensible. Donc il nous faut aujourd'hui construire les bons outils d'exploitation, qu'ils soient numériques, qu'ils soient métrologiques, pour être capables d'ajuster en temps réel les conditions d'exploitation de nos systèmes industriels aux contraintes imposées par le réseau et à la fragilité de la rivière, notamment à l'étiage. Donc c'est un axe de travail fort aujourd'hui du SIAP. Et enfin, le dernier enjeu qu'il ne faut pas oublier, la question du maintien de notre patrimoine industriel, un patrimoine industriel qui pèse plus de 10 milliards d'euros, qu'il faut maintenir dans le temps pour garder de la performance, à la fois en limitant son vieillissement et en privilégiant, je dirais, la jouvence, la réhabilitation des ouvrages pour je dirais, être capable de maintenir en état nos équipements en limitant l'empreinte économique et environnementale de cette maintenance. Voilà ce que je pouvais vous dire en quelques minutes. Je vous remercie pour votre attention. Je vous souhaite à toutes et tous une bonne COP28.
Okay, so we missed out on the thank yous. Okay. So we might move on then to Dieter Rothenberger. And my question for you is about the German Development Cooperation and the support that you're giving to the Water Operator Partnership. And what is it that you see as the value of this approach? And I think particularly obviously in relation to our theme of climate resilient water and sanitation in cities.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. And thanks for the invitation. Well, what we see is that climate change is actually, you can define it as a risk multiplier from a lot of issues which are happening in our environment, in our world. And water actually is a resilience multiplier. So that's a very strong, water is a very strong power to deal with the impact of climate change and to adapt to climate change. So I think this is something, where we start. And then obviously utilities, when you talk about an urban adaptation or resilience agenda, utilities are at the front line of these resilience agenda. So therefore we have to, and this is where the German Development Corporation also joining, the Netherlands and also of course GWOPA, for example, are having a very strong focus on the strengthening the support for the utilities. And I think that's key, because in the end, if we really want to be able as a city to deal with water shortages, to deal with droughts, deal with floods, and really kind of revamp the system, the overall urban system with regard to resilience to these kind of events, we have to deal with the utilities, enable them to take that role. And unfortunately, what we saw, of course, in the past is that a lot of utilities, as has been mentioned also by our CEO, they still lack the capacities. So we have to find new ways in dealing with these capacity development. And one of these new ways are what you have mentioned, these water operator partnerships, which is an instrument where basically peer-to-peer learning is at the front and center. That means that you've got utilities from Germany, from the Netherlands, from France, from various countries, from the south, basically working with other utilities, partner utilities in the south, to strengthen their capabilities to provide technical, but when I say technical, I don't mean only technical support, but also support on management level. Because I fully underline what you had said, that of course you can tackle technical issues and make sure, or try to make sure that you reduce your water losses or whatever. But if you don't have the institutions right, if you don't have the management systems right, if you don't have also the reform-mindedness of a utility, then a lot of these activities are actually proving very, very difficult to be sustained. And so this is where we have started basically joining hands, as Ms. Hoven has said, with also the German Development Finance Institution, KfW, to establish this Urban Water Catalyst initiative. And the idea of that initiative is, as I've said, we start with technical assistance, with water operator partnerships, but with a clear aim to achieve that turnaround, and with a immediately, right from the beginning, a structured process to include also investment or finance for the utilities, starting with small finance, larger finance, and then also, because the overall aim is that these utilities are able to access local capital markets. So that also guarantees will be provided, so that the local banks, because obviously for them it can be huge risk, even if that utility is performing better than maybe 5 years ago, it's a risk of lending. So you have to provide a full package in order to be really successful. And this is what we are hoping to be able to do with that Urban Water Catalyst initiative.
Great, thank you. Sounds very exciting. I hope that the theory of the technical assistance followed by the small scale finance and larger finance works out. I guess we'll all be watching to see. So next on our panel is, well, it's actually the video so that we're going to jump to next. So the panel member who is online is Khaldun Kashman, who is Secretary General in the Arab Countries Water Utilities Association. And as I understand it, he's going to be speaking about what we need to do to stimulate more political will. Yeah, thanks, panel. You need to be a bit versatile, moving back and forward. So the question is about what can we do to stimulate more political will, which we heard at the opening of this session, to engage water and sanitation utilities in addressing extreme climate impacts, and what types of strategies is the association doing to support activities like water reuse and wastewater reuse that we heard about from France earlier. So over to you, Mr. Kashman.
Thank you, ma'am. And I would like to thank everybody and UN Habitat, Guba, for inviting me, our partners. Well, it's, as you know, the climate change is attacking very harmful and very fast. And Jordan and the Arab country, 14 Arab countries, are lack of water resources, even below the line of poverty in water. Now, the climate change affects all more and make this scarcity more deep. Therefore, I think we have to look for unconventional solutions, and decision makers should go to make the resilience and try to overcome the water scarcity to provide better water for the people. In this aspect, I think we have to go for unconventional water resources, especially the reuse. Now, in two cases, they expand in the wastewater services and building the new wastewater treatment plant in good quality that we can use it in unrestricted water irrigation, and then reallocate the water resources, the fresh one, for other uses, municipal and tourism, industrial, whatever. The second issue, we have a high non-revenue water in most of the Arab utilities. Sometimes it reaches to 60, 50, 60. The announced figure by the Minister of Water and Irrigation for the year 2022, it was 50.5%. It means more than 170 million cubic meter need to be reclaimed by reducing the non-revenue water. There is a plan for reducing the non-revenue water and big investment. I think it should be accelerated and increase the percentage of reduction in every year. And in the other way, the efficiency of water uses. Therefore, now there is an ongoing project financed by USAID. It's called WEC. This project is thinking of redeveloping the already developed manuals in municipal water in 2008, and that we have to revise and include the new technologies all over the world that makes help in improving the water efficiency in municipal, and again revise the standards, regulations, bylaws to enhance the private sector and more involvement. This project is actually needs to institutionalize the manuals by the Jordanian cabinet and make it economically driven by the private sector to be involved in financing the solutions for the wastewater, the water sanitation technology. Moreover, agriculture is using more than 50% of our water resources. 193 million from the fresh water in Jordan Valley and 262 million cubic meter from groundwater. We are trying to, Aqua is involved now in developing these readers and manuals by applying correction measures to improve the efficiency in irrigation, use the best practices in irrigation and filterization, and also revised all the laws and bylaws and regulations within the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Water, the groundwater monitoring bylaw to allow to reduce the illegal and drilling and illegal use, and again revise the treated wastewater regulations to use it restricted. In the municipal also, there are big offers, although it's using only 3%, the municipal sector using 3% of our total water resources, but there are also 181 licensed and unlicensed wells. These unlicensed wells that needs to be monitored in the best way to reduce the illegal use by improving a smart monitoring technologies for the abstraction, and again to use the to improve to revise the groundwater water management to be able to have more monitoring and reduce the illegal, and revise the tariffs of abstraction, especially which is above the allowable.
Okay.
Again,
Can
here,
I ask you to finish up your comments? Is that okay?
yeah, it will be within a few minutes. For
30 seconds.
building capacity, only 1 minute. We developed more than 34 building capacity programs. And now we are institutionalizing the water demand management within the Ministry of Water and Resources in Jordan, water and irrigation in Jordan, and this will be needed to be expanded in the Arab region. We developed training program and material in institutionalization of sanitation safety plan, and also the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, and developing training programs and sanitation safety plan that people can use the treated water in safely and in unrestricted water irrigation. We are also providing consultation for our members all over the Arab countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and very inspiring to hear of such diverse actions to support capacity, and especially that focus on demand management and efficiency in both agriculture and cities. So if I could ask our panel to jump back and forth. So my next question is for you, Andre, and that's about the water operator partnerships. And we understand that there's been quite a demand for those partnerships. And what we're moving to now is a focus on sanitation, which I, as someone who cares a lot about sanitation, am very pleased to hear about. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the sanitation strategy that's going to promote wastewater and sanitation within these water operator partnerships.
Thanks, Juliet. Just as a quick introduction, time and water are very closely linked. So those people who use more of it upstream, people downstream have less of it. And I think there's something we can learn for the water sector, is that we actually have to instill the value of sharing water and also only using the water which we need, same as applies also to time. I was very happy to listen to Ingrid Hoven's statement, where she was speaking about the importance of urban planning and water management. I think this linkages is very important. And for the water sector to get out of this sector and move into the urban planning sector, I think is very important. We have a guidance document which was adopted in 2016 in Quito in Ecuador, which is the New Urban Agenda. And the New Urban Agenda actually quotes water, I think, 28 times, and provides guidance on how we can actually plan our cities to be more water sensitive cities in this context. So I think there's a great opportunity in reviewing and planning our cities, nature-based, green, blue, brown solutions for cities and water management. The second thing I just wanted to say was that 20 years ago, our Secretary General Kofi Annan actually set up a high-level advisory board on water and sanitation, which was at that time chaired by the Prince of Orange, now the King of the Netherlands. And one of the most transformative suggestions which this Secretary General's advisory board actually came up with was that if we want to make a difference in terms of our urban water management, we have to focus on utilities. And it is out of that the Global Water Operators Partnerships Alliance actually grew out, and it's based in Bonn now in Germany. And we've heard from Dieter what it does, how it twins and partners and builds partnerships amongst the utilities. The third thing I'd like to say is if we look at the SDGs, we're behind in terms of water, but we are much, much further behind in terms of sanitation. And when I was listening, if I would have done a word count of what everybody was speaking about, I think 90% people were speaking about water and not sanitation. So sometimes we try and switch it around and say sanitation and water, just to re-emphasize this. And this is something we've been trying to do as GWOPA. We've been speaking about WOPs, so Water Operators Partnerships. Now we're trying to move to SWOPs, Sanitation Water Operators Partnerships. And this, of course, is quite an interesting journey. And what we've also heard from South Africa, it's not a technology challenge which we're facing. It's not a financial challenge which we're facing. It's not a resource challenge which we're facing. It's a governance challenge. And we have to get the governance right for sanitation and for water. So one of the challenges of our strategy for promoting SWOPs is that very often there is no institutional home. Many of the operators have a mandate only on water, and they're only getting sanitation to it. Even at national level, Ministry of Water very often does not have the mandate to deal with sanitation. It's the Ministry of Health. So some countries like Senegal have actually put up a Ministry of Water and Sanitation. So this governance part is very important. At the local authority level, it's very important to see that the operators can actually cover water and sanitation. The second challenge in terms of promoting a sanitation strategy for swaps is the informality. 50 to 60% of the people live in low-income settlements in slums, which are not covered by formal operators. There are small-scale independent providers. There are on-site systems. And we have to see how we can integrate and extend services to the poor through the formal sector and also building partnerships, both in water, but also in sanitation. Additional opportunities which are coming up is actually also linking to other sectors and coupling with them, for instance, energy. So water, sanitation, and energy, and combining some of the utilities in this is also an opportunity so that actually operators can become producers of energy. There are some very good examples where utilities, Empresas de Medellín, for instance, where the utility is covering water, sanitation, and also energy, and generating energy. The next nexus in terms of sanitation is also food, biosolids, and using that for food and reforestation. So these are some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities which we see in engaging in a sanitation strategy for more swaps. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. And great to hear the recognition about the institutional context for sanitation, because the first thing I wondered when I saw the idea of the swaps was thinking exactly what you said, that we don't have sanitation under the mandate of most of our utilities in developing countries. And so who does that mean? Who's in the partnership? All these small informal providers or the city government? Who's in the partnership? So it sounds like there's plenty to work on. So I'd like to ask a broader question to both Andre and also a colleague from France, and that's about a commitment that was made at the UN 2023 conference, and it was a commitment that was made on wastewater, and we're interested to hear about how your organisations are going to move ahead with that. I'm not sure if in South Africa you've also heard about the commitment or signed on to the commitment, but perhaps as a country perspective, you could also comment. So perhaps we start with you. Yep.
Sure, thank you. So yes, we organized together with Habitat in New York during the March conference an event, and we launched as part of the commitments that all participants were invited to take. We launched an alliance. And yeah, I think just to follow what you just said, it needs a lot of awareness. We know that target 6.3 is the one that is the most behind, and it's quite hard to understand. So we've decided there were a few countries indeed. There was Ghana. Ghana actually hosted the event. So Ghana was very involved. And a few other countries, France, but also Kenya, and a Latin American country that I can't remember, so sorry. And so we're trying to grow this alliance. So we're happy to answer, to be a contact and to organize events together. And I think I'd like to mention here, because we heard examples of agencies, development agencies like GIZ. So I'd just like to say a few words about decentralized cooperation, precisely the potential that can be leveraged by local governments and with their colleagues from utilities. CEAP, the one that we saw the man talk about CEAPs, they have engaged for decades in that kind of cooperation. There's so much that can be learned on both sides. And it's a great potential that you are trying to promote precisely. And just in France, we passed a law in 2005 allowing local governments and utilities, water and sanitation, to allocate 5% of their, up to 1%. In 2005, up to 1% of their annual budget to decentralized cooperation. So there are, I think 200 million euros that are being granted every year, but then there is also the different kinds of cooperation, more technical capacity development, et cetera, but much more can be done in France, and I'm pretty sure that this is the potential that you're trying to leverage as well.
Thanks. Yes, I think this solidarity contribution of 1%, which France is doing, I think Wallonia in Belgium is also doing that to support and invest and have decentralized cooperation is very important. 6.3 in terms of the Global Expanded Monitoring Initiative for Wastewater is extremely important. And again, one of the strategic entry points is the utilities, to see how can we actually empower utilities to collect more information on domestic and industrial wastewater. I think we've also learned a lot during COVID, because from the public health perspective, there has been much more attention in monitoring wastewater. We could actually track and forecast the spread of COVID in urban areas by looking at the wastewater. And I think Amsterdam was one of the first to do this, to see what was actually coming out of Schiphol Airport and what is entering into the country. So I think this public health perspective is actually one of the, let's say, awareness raising initiatives to see that it's much more important to really empower the utilities to collect data on wastewater. Thank you.
Great. So did you want to comment on the 2030 commitment and South Africa?
At the SDG goals commitment.
I think it's beyond, my understanding, it's beyond that, and it's particularly around monitoring of wastewater, and as Andre mentioned, having better systems to actually understand what pollution is being released.
We do have quite good data. We put a lot of effort into monitoring it, but recently we just released some of our monitoring reports publicly, which showed quite a severe decline in the performance of our municipal wastewater treatment systems. So we are succeeding in the monitoring. The monitoring is indicating a decline. The key challenge is not so much monitoring, it's about how do we address the decline and the pollution.
Yes, thank you very much. I cannot speak on behalf of the German government, being the development cooperation arm of BMZ, but I know, and of course we see it also in the policies of BMZ, that whole question of circular economy, in particular in the water sector, is gaining more and more traction. And I think that's very important, because that resource, as we have said, is important on the one hand, and of course in terms of resources, but also in terms of all the health and sanitation impacts. So therefore, definitely this is something which is also at the heart of the of the developments in Germany. And if you look at our water division, which was before water division in the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, now circular economy is part of that as well. And of course, that brings us, now we are advising the ministry on water and sanitation, that brings us closer to those people who know maybe even much more about closing the loops. Yeah. So that's one point. I just want to mention about the 1%. And I have to say, unfortunately, I'm always envious about the European countries who can do that. Unfortunately, Germany can't do that, because in our water and sanitation tariffs, they are regulated in a way that we can only include costs which are actually to be paid by the consumers and not can be used then for such kind of work. So therefore, we need to find, and we are working hard on finding alternative possibilities. And last point I just wanted to mention is that Germany has been for quite a long time providing the secretariat for the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance, which actually has started, I think, almost 20 years ago, and has a lot of groundwork, and very much with decentralized, even individual experts. And so I like very much now that link also, with the more institutionalized level. That's great.
Great. So thank you very much. I've been shown the sign that says that we need to close up. So if I could please thank all our panel members. And I'm just going to call on Emrah to make a few closing remarks.
Maybe I can use this mic.
Thanks, Juliet. So I'm going to be very fast and brief. So basically, what came out in this really rich discussion is we heard from the France on water plan, and it's sort of like a nationwide sort of policy to basically to work on the water issues to make sure this is really is prioritized. So water efficiency was stressed, and is also increasing and water reuse was also underlined. And then from Ms. Hoven, I think she gave a couple of like really interesting, inspiring sort of key messages, one of which was water is central to the climate adaptation. And we really need to get this attention of the policymakers. And then she also underlined the interesting areas of such as like participatory approach to work with the water sectors and beyond the water sectors and stakeholders, and the need for cross-sectoral approach and integrated approach. And then certainly interesting to see from the Paris Water Agency that the wastewater plant can be also a power source. Almost 50% of what they need is generated, but it's also a connection to agriculture using basically producing fertilizer for agriculture, which was interesting, and is actually also a key message to be passed on. And from detailed intervention, so is a kind of like slogans that we also like to post it on the on our social media. Climate change is a risk multiplier, but the water is a resilient multiplier. This is really explains how water is central to the discussion, and again, to build resilience, we really need to get the finance rights to the right people, and then to push it on there. And Dr. Shannon is underlined the importance of basically the getting institution rights, and no technical solution is possible without the right institution in place. We really need to work the capacity building. And Andre really again emphasized the linkages, interlinkages with other cross-sectoral issues, energy and agriculture and all those areas, and then the need to work with the water and sanitation operators to improve their capacities. So we really need to get those institutions right on the top. And then finally, I guess the some of the SDG 6 targets, especially the sanitation, I guess Andre again emphasized on the sanitation. So we keep talking about water. I guess we all care. We want to have a drinking water, but we don't really care. We don't really care much what comes out from everywhere. So that we need to really look after those part, which really we need to look after the sanitation. So he mentioned the Global Water Operator Partnership Alliances strategy, focusing on sanitation focused water operator partnership that is now becoming more prominent in the alliances work. And that's all I got. Thank you very much.
My closing comment would just be that on this, climate change is a risk multiplier, and sanitation and water are resilience multipliers.